All the apps I've looked into so far end up hard-coding text spans or repeating span logic all across the codebase, which quickly gets messy and hard to maintain. So in this video I'm showing you a tiny reusable API that makes creating multiple clickable spans intuitive, dynamic and maintainable, exactly how it should be in Compose. Let's go. We are going to build this component gradually so that I can show you my thought process and how am I approaching these things usually. To begin with, I have these three string values, and it's important to mention that the terms and the privacy are substrings inside a full text, and that's important to get started, but then we want to decouple and make it dynamic so the text wouldn't matter whether it is coming from string resources or from somewhere else. As we are gonna see, it won't matter at all. Now, to make the terms and the privacy clickable spans in the full text, I'm going to utilize the built annotated string function. The first thing that I'm gonna do inside is I'll append the full text, and now that I have the full text I can create the spans. To do so I'm gonna use the add link function, and while we are here I'm gonna encourage you to check out the API and see what are all the different possibilities that we can do. It is very rich. Now here we could either pass link annotation clickable or link annotation URL. The difference is that if you are using the URL, it is going to try to automatically handle the clicks on potential links, but because we want a little bit more control, in fact, we want to make anything clickable and then handle the click on our own, either open link or do whatever, I'm gonna go by using link annotation clickable. Next, I have to supply start and end, which are the indexes of the substring that is contained in a full string. To find the start, I'm going to use the indexOf function, and the indexOf function will give me the start index of the terms inside a full text. And since I know the term's length, to determine the end, I'm going to take the first index and I'm going to add to it the term's length. And that's going to give me the end index of the terms. Now inside of the clickable we have to supply tag, and as a tag I'm going to pass the term's value. And additionally here we can apply styles to change the appearance of the clickable span, and link interaction listener, which is going to allow us to handle the clicks on that particular span. So let's start with the styles. Here I have a bunch of options about the different states of the span, and I'm only going to use the style which is the default appearance of the span, and that's going to be enough for this exercise. And because this type is a span style, the API is super rich and I can change pretty much anything that I want about the clickable span. So if you look into this API, you can explore it a little bit more and you can find out that you can pretty much change anything you want. For the time being, I'm only going to change the color and I'm gonna apply red. Finally, I'm gonna supply link interaction listener. I'm gonna leave it empty for now. Next, I'm gonna repeat the same for the privacy. So I'm gonna just take this code and I'll repeat it again. And I'm only going to replace terms with privacy. Then I'm also going to change the color from red to blue to have some difference. And finally, inside indexOf, I'm gonna replace terms with privacy to avoid crashes due to index inconsistencies. And now that I have the annotated string, I'm gonna use text composable to render it. And boom, on the right side we can see the preview, how does it look like. And that's pretty much where we wanted to go. And next I would like to detect the clicks on the clickable spans and somehow render what was clicked last. To do so, I'm going to introduce a state here that I'm gonna name last clicked, and I'm going to default it to none. I want to be able to mutate this, so let's switch this to variable. And now inside the link interaction listener, I'm going to update the last clicked, and I'm gonna repeat the same for the privacy. Ultimately, I'm going to render the last clicked as well, and I'm going to wrap them into a column to avoid potential overlaps. Now let's run this in interactive mode and see what happens. So I have these clickable spans, and when I click in each of them, I am seeing what was clicked last, and that's what I wanted to go. Now this is all great for a start, but I want to avoid repeating this logic anytime I need clickable spans. So I want to create something I can reuse across the application. To do that, I'm gonna copy the built annotated string block, and then below this function, I'm gonna create new private function. I'm gonna call it create clickable text, and initially it's gonna take in the full text only. Then I'll make it return annotated string, and then inside I'm gonna say return and paste the block that I've copied. Now if you pay attention what happens here inside, we have three things that are changing: the value, the color, and what happens on click, and that's for both links, which means I can group those things together. To do so, I'm gonna introduce a new class, and I'm gonna call it clickable text item. It's gonna take the clickable text value, a color for the clickable text that I'm gonna default to unspecified, and finally a non-click callback. Now that I have the clickable text item class, I'm gonna add one more argument in the create clickable text function. I'm gonna name it clickables, and it's gonna be of type clickable text item. And because I want to make this dynamic, I'm gonna make this var arg. Obviously, I can make this a list that's gonna default to empty list, but then on the call side, it's gonna make it more cumbersome to pass list. This way, it's gonna make the usage side a bit better. Next, inside the function, once I append the full text, I'm going to loop through all the clickables. And before I do anything with this clickable, first I want to check if the full text contains the clickable text. Otherwise, if it doesn't contain, the index of is going to throw an exception and this whole thing is not going to work at all. And so first I'm going to add an if here that will check if the full text contains the clickable text. And when that's the case, I'm going to add a link. So I'm going to copy this thing from here. I'm going to paste it inside. And then I'm going to replace the terms with the clickable text. I'm going to replace the color with the clickable color. And ultimately inside the link interaction listener, I'm going to call the onClick callback. And then I'm going to apply the clickable text inside the index of functions as well. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and delete the rest of the code inside this function. It's worth to mention here that inside the clickable text item, instead of the color, I can pull the entire text link style if I want to. So it's up to you. Maybe if you want something more flexible, you can change that type. But for the sake of this example, the color is just more than enough to show how everything works. Now let's go back to our starting point and replace the usages with this new function that we have created. Instead of this build annotated string, I'm going to use the create clickable text. Again, I'm going to pass the full text inside. And now because of the var args, I don't have to pass anything in addition. And as we can see on the right side, the preview already changed. But to make the terms and conditions and the privacy policy working again, first I'm gonna pass clickable text item for the terms. I'm gonna apply color red, and on click, I'm gonna update the last clicked. And I'm gonna repeat the same for the privacy. And for the privacy, we had color blue, so I'm gonna also apply blue here. And the last click is gonna be the privacy. Now, if I run this again in interactive mode, the whole thing remains working as it was before. But now, instead of repeating myself every time I need to create some clickable links, I have a reusable create clickable text that I can reuse anytime I want. Now, to bring this even a step further, what I can do is I can make the clickable text expose the API that the create clickable text exposes. First, because the clickable text function is public, I'm going to make the class public. And I'm gonna mark it with immutable marker, and even I can make it a data class. Then for the clickable text, I'm going to take in the full text as well, and a list of clickable text items. Now obviously I can use var args here as well, and it's gonna work just fine, but to make it more compose idiomatic, I'm gonna take an immutable list. And because the clickables are optional, I'm going to default this to an empty list. Now that I have the arguments in, I'm gonna cut off these values from here. Then to create the clickable text, I'm gonna pass the full text and the clickables. And ultimately, I'm gonna remove the column. I'm gonna just leave the text itself. And I'll also apply the modifier that comes into the clickable text. And now my clickable text is a reusable composable that exposes very dynamic API that allows me to create any parts of the text clickable and style them the way I want. Now let's jump to the preview and see how we can use this. Here I'm gonna paste the last click text, and then I'm gonna paste the rest of the things that I've taken from the clickable text initially. And then inside the clickable text, I'm gonna pass the full text as well as the clickable text items. Finally, let's run the preview in interactive mode once again and make sure that everything works as it used to before. Additionally, what I want to point out is that the text now can come from anywhere we want. We are completely independent from the text, and we can concatenate it. We can have placeholders. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that now I have an intuitive and dynamic API that allows me to add clickable text items on demand the way I want. So for example, if I add here something else, let's make this green and also put this back to none. So if I apply here a word that does not exist, nothing happens. Everything remains working. It just couldn't find a word. Or if I apply a word that is existing inside a full string, it's just gonna find it and make it clickable. And then when I click on it, it's just gonna work the way we expect it to work. Now that's it. Hope you find this useful. You can find a link to the code base in the description below. If you want to get more and more in depth of this, find a link below this video and check it out.